Welcome back. This is part two of our lessons learned in the gardening series. So, today we're talking about 13 more lessons I've learned as a new container gardener. The first is to adjust the water spray power for new seeds and small seedlings. The normal standard spray that we use on our garden hose is often going to be too powerful when we first plant seeds or within the first probably 3 or 4 weeks as those seeds are growing. That spray can dislodge the seeds and it can undo all of the work you're doing, especially if you're seed starting or just recently planted something. The fix is to adjust the water to a mist for new seeds, or if you're using seed trays, hydrate your plants by placing water in the bottom of the seed tray. Our next one is planting seeds too deep. This is one that I made definitely the first year I started gardening. I think, oh, you want to get the seeds good down in that soil, but that's actually the opposite of what you want to do. It's critical that seeds see the sun. They've got to be able to see that sunshine in order to germinate properly. So, to fix this, we'll make sure to plant shallowly. And for tiny seeds like lettuce, you want to sow them on the surface of your soil and then just barely press them lightly into the soil. Another fix for this is to check your seed packets for the suggested seed depth. Normally, it's going to be really something really small, like a quarter of an inch or something very small. And another rule that some people go by is to plant 2 to 3 times the seed's diameter. That's the depth that you use. So either of those methods that I mentioned, you can tell just based on what I'm saying that you're going to be planting that pretty close to the top of your soil level. Number three is acknowledging that one plant may need different types of fertilizer at different stages of its life cycle. This is one I learned personally through trial and error because there's a lot of conflicting information online about what kind of fertilizer different plants need. And just by trying, I learned over time what was more of the correct information, especially for the plants that I was growing. And so, if you want to save a few steps, you can grab my free ultimate fertilizer guide, and the link is in the description. Our number four is going to go more into why there's an issue and why you want to be concerned on what kind of fertilizer you're using at different stages. So, number four is about over fertilizing, especially thinking about nitrogen. A lot of us, we absolutely love Alaska fish food because it's liquid, so you can use it all year round. You don't have to worry about needing a certain temperature to break it down and things of that nature. And nitrogen, it's very nitrogen heavy, the Alaska fish food. It's great, but unless you're planting something that's going to be all leafy, something like, greens and cabbages, things like that, you're probably going to need to reduce or eliminate the use of the nitrogen at some stage in the plant's growth. Usually, you're going to eliminate or pull back on that nitrogen around the flowering stage or the fruiting stage when you see that flowers or fruit are starting to emerge. Too much nitrogen can hinder the development of your crop and cause the plant to produce a ton of leaves instead of producing the flower or fruit that it needs to produce so that you can harvest it properly. And that kind of, like I said, ties into number three. If you keep doing that, that's the downside of that. That's why you want to kind of make sure that you do, fertilize it the proper way at the proper stages. And our fix is to, of course, adjust the nitrogen as the plant progresses. And if you grab my free fertilizer guide in the description, I'll give you a shortcut on knowing when to go ahead and adjust and what to adjust to after you stop fertilizing with the nitrogen. The next lesson I learned is to fertilize on a schedule. So, as you can see now, we've kind of got a trend going. Fertilizer is very important to our gardens. And the issue here is that sporadic fertilizing leads to low growth or no growth. Remember that the fertilizer is the plant's food. And like anything else that needs food, it'll stop growing or slow down growing if it's not fertilized enough or if it's not fertilized properly. The fix here, the one I love, is just to do a recurring calendar reminder on your cell phone, and it'll pop up automatically on the day you need it. So, for example, I often fertilize my entire garden every 2 weeks. There are some things like certain soil amendments I do, like calcium for my bell peppers and watermelons, and those are done weekly. So, what I do is literally just create that calendar event on my phone, and then I drop down and tell it do a recurring theme and recur this many times, recur once a week or recur every 2 weeks. And I don't put an end date on it. I can always go out there and delete it, when the end of the season. And these reminders will help take the stress and guesswork out of knowing when you need to feed your garden. Number six is one of my favorites. It's to always track significant garden actions. Tracking is going to be critical. Every time you go into the garden and you do anything besides watering or light pest control, write it down. Your fix is to just get a cheap tablet or journal from a dollar store. I like the 5 by 8 size. It's just kind of easier to hold it and use it, when I'm jotting things down. But of course, if you want an 8.5 by 11 size or even, something, larger, whatever size you like will work. And you're just going to write down the date that you were in the garden, write down exactly what you did. If you fertilized, write that down and write down the type of fertilizer you used. If you planted something new, write the exact name of that plant down. This is going to be helpful if you plant multiple types of the same crop on the same day. So, if you do several types of cucumbers or several types of tomatoes on the same day, it's going to help you to jot that down. This will also help you with knowing, going into number seven in a second. Um, Writing everything down may take a few minutes up front, and I'm going to acknowledge that because you do have to sit down and just kind of go back through everything. But once you do it, it's going to be super worth it because you're going to easily be able to track when you need to do what, when you think you're coming up on important dates in the window of time in the plant's life cycle. And if something happens, you can note, okay, this happened this many days in. It's very important to track these things, and it's going to be super helpful. Sitting down for 10 minutes, while in real time, while you can recall everything, is going to be priceless a month or 2 out when you're trying to recall what happened and when you did it. So at this point, I want to ask, are you tracking your garden actions or do you need to start tracking them? Put track in the comments if you're already tracking your garden actions, or put start in the comments if you want to start tracking your garden actions. Related to our previous one is number seven, tracking our dates to harvest windows or our days to harvest. Sometimes they're called days to maturity on your seed packet. That's the time frame that's basically telling you this is the time frame from you planting that initial seed to the time you should be able to actually bring that fruit and that harvest in. Those time frames vary even within food groups. There are sweet potatoes that need certain varieties that need 90 days to hit maturity, and there are others that need closer to 110 or 120 days. And that's a significant difference in the growing season. Those extra days can be critical as to if you get a good harvest or as to if you get a harvest at all. There are videos floating around online where people have planted sweet potatoes and they had nothing when they tried to harvest. I did my first crop recently and I've got a video out, and I was, it was kind of the thing of not only was it my first crop, but the frost hit before I could get to it. Okay. And so that, the frost can sometimes just ruin a harvest on sweet potatoes. So I had a couple, it was like a really close window in there, and I got in there and it was about 48 hours, and you'll have to check my video out to see how that went. But like I said, sometimes people have vines and they think they've got this harvest down there and there's nothing there, or they're like these little undeveloped pieces that are too small to eat. So we always want to make sure we track our harvest days to harvest or days to maturity. Okay, so you want to check your seed packet. That's your fix. Check your seed packet and write down the days to harvest in your garden journal whenever you plant the crop initially. Always remember that this is an estimate, and that time frame is going to depend on how often you fertilize, how often you water, and whether the seed was planted at the right time and whether it was planted under the right conditions. Our next one is minimizing soil health. Whenever you harvest something, I want you to realize that the soil has fed that plant all these months or weeks in order to create a harvest. That means the soil gets depleted of nutrients and then you need to go back and replace those nutrients. Kind of like our systems, our own systems, if you go out and jog and you sweat and you lose that fluid and you can get dehydrated, well then you need to replenish your nutrients, your electrolytes. Same thing with the soil. And so over time, depleted soil can become too sandy, too acidic, or form a heavy clay. So remember this: healthy soil equals healthy plants. So here we've got an easy fix. You can focus on always adding organic matter, things like black cow or homemade compost to your soil whenever you've harvested something. You after you harvest, add that to the top of your soil, just top it off to refresh your soil. You can even mix it in, the first few inches of soil if you want to make sure it really, gets in there for the next set of plants. An intermediate fix, of course, we have people sometimes that want to go to the next level is to order a soil test kit and then send off that sample and then have the lab send those results back to you. You'll then have a baseline for your soil and you'll know exactly what nutrients your soil lacks, or maybe there may even be nutrients that you have too much of in your soil that are out of balance. Then you'll know exactly which nutrients to add in. I also want to note there are soil amendments like lime that people apply to the soil in the off season to prepare for the upcoming season. So you choose how detailed you want to be when it comes to maintaining your soil's health. Of course, the compost is easier and cheaper, but the soil test is going to be more accurate, but it's also going to probably be more expensive. Number 9 is one I have to even remind myself of on a regular basis. It's to expect failure and embrace failure. Don't get discouraged by failure. No matter how many videos you watch, gardening books you read, something unexpected is going to probably happen. I've grown a beautiful squash in my garden only to come back the next day and find it completely decimated by insects. I've had perfect watermelons develop black spots, which I now know as blossom end rot. But the first time it happened, I didn't know what blossom end rot was. And so those spots developed seemingly overnight. Of course, I now know to treat my melons with calcium beforehand so that never happens. But of course, when I saw that blossom end rot, what did I do? I got on YouTube like you are now and I researched to prevent it from happening again. So you're at the right place. And remember that there's no such thing as a black thumb. You're learning, you're always learning. So the fix here is to reframe failure as data. Log it in your journal, research what may have happened, make notes about it, take actions on what could be done in the future to prevent the issue. Note the date that it happened so you can go back in your journal and see how many days into the planning process or the plant's life stage that this happened, and then make adjustments and push forward. So we're going to fail, learn, retry, and then adjust. Number 10 is investing in basic quality tools and infrastructure. You'll see over time that there are certain tools that you're going to need time and time again. And it's a good idea to go ahead and invest in those as you go along, as you need them. If you get a cheap garden hose that kinks up, that'll slow you down. And so that may not be the way you water, but if you do water that way, that's something to consider. And things like trowels that are not made well, that will break over time, that will cause you to have to rebuy things over and over again. You'll see as you start working with different types of cucumbers, squash, tomatoes, you're going to probably need, depending on what you're growing, some type of trellis, some type of tomato cage, some type of stakes, some type of, and when I say stakes, stakes, plant clips, raised bed frames, things of that nature. Now, you don't have to do all of these, you don't have to do them all at once. You just want to kind of start thinking about what kind of tools you'll need. You don't need every gadget, but you'll probably need like a trowel, those little small, they look like small shovels, a decent one of those. You'll need, other things that I'll talk about in the fix. So, our fix is to gradually add a few tools to your garden each year. Acquire your essentials like a good pair of pruners, a medium-sized shovel to turn soil or to mix soil, the trowel I mentioned before, plant stakes and plant clips. You can get trellises. They make trellises in a lot of different materials. They make nylon ones, and I've used those for cucumbers, and they work fantastically. They make trellises that are like metal that you can clip your plants to them. There's a lot of different things you can buy, just depending on your budget and the time investment that you want to put into everything. Depending on the different item that you're growing, like certain kinds of squash or vining squash, you're going to need probably a metal trellis for that because those are going to be too heavy for a nylon trellis. So just thinking about that. And these kind of things make your garden more effective and more enjoyable when you have the right tools. It's worth spending an extra 10 or $20 on a tool that's going to last a decade. And I'll link the medium sized shovel that I use down in the comments. The next one is underestimating succession planning. When I first started gardening, I heard about succession planning, and it's basically going to be planting the same crop at different times. So you'll have, two or three different versions of the same crop at different ages and stages. And let's talk about some benefits. Why would you want to do this? It can replace a damaged crop. So I talked about earlier, I had that squash. If I succession plant, I would have had another squash in process already, so losing that squash would not be as bad. I would have a backup against that failure. Succession planning also helps give you a constant food supply. Once you start getting fruit off of your or in vegetables off of the plant, you're gonna, as you do that, it's gonna take the plant, depending on what it is, it may take another 2 or 3 weeks or more for it to produce more of that. So when you get that off, you'll have, if you've got other versions of that plant, then you don't have to always wait that extra 2 or 3 weeks. You can say, well, let me go to the next one and see what's on that one. It may, you won't maybe you'll wait a week instead of 3 weeks because you got a succession plant out there. It also helps lengthen your harvesting season, and it makes for more consistent meal planning. I know a lot of people still meal plan, and if you're able to do it from your garden, you have a more reliable view of what vegetables that you'll have every week. So, our fix here is to plan to plant your most loved crops in intervals of 3 or 4 weeks. Again, this needs to be things that you already eat on like a weekly basis because you don't want to plant these things and just get tired of them. So, it's only certain things that you want to succession plan. And you want to pay attention to the growing windows because at some point it'll be too late in the season to plant that crop. Okay, we're almost finished. Number 12 is repeating crops in the same soil or in the same area. So basically, overlooking crop rotation. So there's the thing about crop rotation in gardens, whether it's a container garden or a traditional in ground gardening, you want to always try to move your crops around. And the reason we want to do that, there's a few benefits to that. It reduces soil-borne diseases by breaking the pathogen's life cycle. So if you've got tomatoes in a spot and they get some type of wilt or some type of specific disease to tomatoes, if you plant the next set of tomatoes in that same spot or that same container of soil, there's a good chance that they will get that same disease. So we want to move them around and put something in there that's not susceptible to that same type of disease. Another thing that crop rotation does is it lowers pest pressure because a lot of pests target certain specific plant families. So again, we want to put a different plant family in that pot so that we can kind of break that cycle of that pest being in there. I know I had an issue last year with onion moths, so I made sure to take that soil, move it elsewhere. I'm actually treating it with beneficial nematodes and making sure that I do not put any onions in that soil for this year because I don't want them to eat my crop like they did last year. Another thing that crop rotation does It prevents nutrient depletion because you have, as we mentioned earlier, whenever we're growing things, they're feeding off of that soil. They're pulling those nutrients off. So if you put the same crop there, it's already going to be depleted if you, especially if you forget to amend it with compost or whatever you need in that soil. So it's already been pulled out of the soil, and you put another set of that same item there, it's going to further deplete that same exact nutrient. It's already low on it. It's going to really be low on that nutrient. Another thing that it does, the crop rotation, it balances soil fertility because you alternate things that are considered heavy feeders with plants that are considered light feeders. It also can boost your soil's biology and the microbial diversity over time because you are growing these different plants with these different characteristics in the soil. And the last one that's a really good benefit is going to be the fact that it's going to support the nitrogen benefit. If you do things like legumes in your soil, they do what's called nitrogen fixing in the soil. So it working those in and rotating those around your garden can help fix the nitrogen levels in your soil. So that's another benefit of doing the crop rotation. So, of course, here are our fixes to go ahead and rotate our crops, even in small gardens. Swap your container soils out or rotate your crops between containers and beds. Again, if you label properly, that'll help with this so you'll know what grew in that space. And last, but definitely not least, is trying to go it alone. If you embark on your journey of gardening alone, it's going to get kind of discouraging at times. It's a lot more encouraging to get tips from other gardeners at different levels to be able to ask them questions and even trade plants with them that can help accelerate your learning and enjoyment. There are seed swaps online on social media, things of that nature. You'll have to check to see, about the safety of that particular community. But there's a lot of different communities out there. Gardening is just easier with a community, and that community can also help you recover from gardening issues or gardening disasters. And the fix here is to join my free gardening community on Skool, where you can ask your questions. If we don't know, we'll do our best to find an answer for you. I'd love to talk to you there. And I hope these lessons have helped you. And if they did, please like and subscribe. And check out this next video that YouTube is recommending. See you next time.